just about past, so... Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome everyone, both in the room here and also those of you joining us online. And can everybody hear me okay? Good. Now, a few housekeeping things to start with. Firstly, can you all make sure that your mobiles are either switched off or on silent, so we don't have any alarms or anything going off during the talk. And fire exits. The fire exits are here. There's one here and there's one at the back. And in the event of a fire, just leave everything here and muster in the piazza. We're not expecting a fire drill, so if anything does go off, it'll be for real. But hopefully we won't have any disturbances of that nature. Before I introduce our speaker, just a couple of parish notices. Now, the next talk here, on the 9th of March, there's a change from what was advertised in the Friends magazine. So this now appears on the website. The speaker will now be Gary Mewis, who'll be talking about the differences between operating practices between the TfL, underground, overground, and Great Britain's mainline railway. So that should be an interesting talk. And then in April, 13th of April, here also we have Austin Blackburn talking about challenges of running a bus company in a present environment. And then on 19th of March at Acton, we have John Davis talking, giving a first of two talks on the rise and demise of a bus map. So again, that should be interesting. Now, there are a few tours which are mentioned in the current magazine. The two tours to the 02 Bus Museum and Roughacre Brewery in April, they are both fully booked. Also, the Atlantic Coast Express on the 23rd of May is also now fully booked. However, we do still have spaces on the visit to the Bure Valley Railway and the Norfolk Broads cruise on the 3rd of June, and that can be booked on the website. And finally, you'll see on the website that we are hoping there'll be another visit to the Rayners Lane and Harrow on the Hill signal cabins, either in March or April, and more details will follow immediately if there's anything to confirm there. So that's all for that. So if I can introduce you to our speaker, Steve White, who is the Managing Director of Southeastern Railway, which is leading the first of a new era of integrated railways under public ownership. Steve is a chartered engineer with over 30 years' experience across TfL, Eurostar, Siemens, Govia Thameslink Railway, and now Southeastern. And Steve brings the deep industry expertise and a clear sense of purpose to his role. He is driving a whole system approach that brings track and train together through a joint leadership team with shared accountability to deliver a safer, better railway at lower subsidy. Steve will share how he and his team are tackling challenges across the entire ecosystem rather than in isolation, and how this integrated approach is helping to reshape the national rail network as we move towards Great British Railways. So please welcome Steve.
Thank you so much. I'm very impressed that you're all very punctual. We're trying to keep the mainline railways within 3 minutes for every station stop, and we've made a very punctual start. So that's a good thing. So I'm the manager of the Southeastern Space Railway. That's the 2025 version, not the 1836 version. My background includes high speed with Eurostar. It includes mainline with Silverlink trains, some of you will remember, or GTR. And it also includes 5 years at London Underground running the subsurface railway. Do any of you remember a period of time when the Circle line, the District line, the Metropolitan line, and the Hammersmith and City line ran perfectly, defect-free, not a single signal failure, never ever a train fault? Do you remember that? No, neither do I. Other things to share with you, I am not in the Epstein files. You can check if you want. There's 100,000 pages to look through, but I'll save you the trouble. I'm not there. I'd also like to start by managing your expectations. They say in life, you get what you pay for. And I think tonight was free for all of you. I'm going to start with a little bit of history, and then a little bit of poetry, and then we'll talk about railways. So history. Yesterday was the 190th birthday of our railway. We have the distinction of creating London's oldest railway. Deptford to Spa Lane opened in 1836, shortly ran to Greenwich, and our railway began from that genesis. So we didn't have any cake yesterday, but we were 190 years old yesterday. So a little bit of history, and I'd like to give you a little bit of poetry. I have to say up front, no AI was used in the creation of this poem. I wrote it myself yesterday afternoon. When you hear it, you'd probably wish that I did use AI, but you get what you get. Okay, so this is just for you. I'd like to begin by giving you something to feast on with 60 seconds about Southeastern. I did warn you. Our railway has high speed, mainline and metro. Some of it's quite modern, much of it's retro. Our high speed trains travel at 140. I could say faster than LNER, but that would be a bit naughty. Our mainline services will take you down to the coast. Head there this summer if you like to roast. Our metro services help London live, work and grow. But it's time to replace those networkers. Please tell everyone that you know. And so this short and talentless poem ends with thanks to you, the London Transport Museum friends. Right, you'll be delighted to hear there's no more poetry. So what would I like to share with you this evening? I'd like to tell you a little bit about what we're doing to build an integrated railway on the national rail network. I'd like to talk to you about the changing ecosystem that creates the national railways in the UK as we look towards rail reform and Great British Railways and an avalanche of red, white and blue. I'd like to talk to you about what we need to do to kind of zoom out and find the partners that we need to make National Rail perform to a high standard. I'm going to tell you about an iceberg model. Now, you weren't expecting that when you walked through the door. And I'm also going to tell you a little bit about some of the capability we're trying to build into the National Rail system so it performs better, fundamentally and irreversibly better than it has done hitherto. So, big agenda. So people talk a lot about putting track and train together. That's a rather strange thing to say, isn't it? If you've got a train, what else would you do with it than put it on the track? But there's a lot of talk about putting track and train together, as you can see here with our splendid Javelin just outside Rochester. We don't talk about putting track and train together. The language we use is integrating our railway. And that language permeates our life now. When I buy a cappuccino in the morning, I ask for it to be integrated with a single brown sugar. There's a little Italian restaurant outside. If I was ordering a meal tonight, I'd say, I'd like my spaghetti integrated with some parmesan, please. In a complete failure of domestic planning, on the 27th of September, my beautiful young daughter got married to her fiancé, and we say they became integrated on that day. For better or worse, for richer or poorer. So we're talking about the integration of mainline rail. So what is an integrated railway? Well, in our corner of the world, we asked 100 7-year-olds to draw a high-performing railway. And this is what they came up with. Oh my God, there is nothing at all integrated in the Southeastern Railway. It was created by two rival companies in the 19th century that did their absolute utmost to try and put each other out of business. In trying to go from London to the lucrative ports of Dover and Folkestone, we had the Southeastern Railway taking the southerly route and the London, Chatham and Dover Railway taking the northerly route. That has gifted us a wonderful legacy of two stations in Canterbury, approached from the north and from the south. Multiple stations in Maidstone. The Bermuda Triangle of the Southern Railway, otherwise known as Lewisham. Multiple London termini. Keep getting this message from control. All Charing Cross services will go to Cannon Street, for the foreseeable future. Got this lovely tweet from Heidi Alexander, the Secretary of State for Transport. I've arrived in Cannon Street this morning. I didn't really want to, but thank you, Southeastern. Because we've got the ability to send trains to Cannon Street, Charing Cross and Victoria from our metro services. A legacy of two rival companies that were not at all integrated. They built furiously in the 19th century, and their only mission was to take out the other company. They were obliged to amalgamate in 1899. They became part of the Big Four, including the Southern region, in 1923. But they left us this legacy. We love our railway, but those Victorians didn't know a lot about climate change or accessibility. Whoever did the Hastings line, enough said about that. So that's our legacy. That's the railway that we have today. So in an integrated railway, what are the ingredients that we now have? Well, we have, since the 9th of June last year, brought together Network Rail's Kent route and Southeastern trains into a single organisation. We have retained separate employers. The Kent people still work for Network Rail and the Southeastern people still have their own employer as part of DFTO. But we are now 6,740 people in one team. 383 trains of various vintages and types. 181 stations. There are more stations in Kent than any other county. Lucky us. We do about 140 million passenger journeys every year. And this is the asset base that we do it on. I wake up in the morning, I've got a points failure. I'm going, why have I got a points failure this morning? Well, we've got 1,545 sets of points. So I should be congratulating my team for all 1,544 others performing perfectly. We've got, between train detection and signals, approximately 10,000 assets. And my infrastructure director told me very proudly, we've got the greatest range of asset types in Kent than any other route. I said, that's not good, is it? He said, no, it's not really. 329 level crossings, quite extraordinary. 329. And 540 track miles, except the 60-foot section that's currently melted in the Tunbridge Wells area. So those are the ingredients of the integrated railway that we have of today, that we established on the 9th of June 2025. And what's the recipe of an integrated railway prior to rail reform? Well, the first thing you get is a joint leadership team. I've been appointed as the managing director accountable for the route and the operator. I said to Peter Hendy, what does that mean? He says, whatever goes wrong, it's your fault. He said, someone stands up in the House of Commons and says, I don't like the car park at Orpington. I think your trains are too slow on the Hayes line. I think your toilets aren't working properly on the Hastings lines. He says, it doesn't matter what it is, it's your fault. I said, what if someone stands up and says, we quite like what's happening on Southeastern, who do we thank? And he just looked at me and said, no one's going to say that. So what you get on day one of an integrated railway like Southeastern or Southwestern, it's the end of the blame game. I can't say, I'm really sorry, Southeastern customers, you're late this evening because there's a Network Rail track fault, or there's a signal failure, or there's a freight train in the way. The blame game stops on day one because we are accountable directly to our customers and our stakeholders. We've agreed what we want to achieve together, our purpose and our objectives. And we've started to apply something we call system thinking, looking at the ecosystem as a whole. I will talk more about that shortly, whether you want me to or not. We've got a joint profit and loss account, so we look at all the revenue we take from our customers and from advertising and retail tenancies, and we look at all the money the operator spends and all the money the route spends, and that gives us a joint profit and loss account, which tells me what I thought was a heavily subsidised railway when I was at Southeastern is in fact even more heavily subsidised when you include the spend going into the operation and maintenance of the railway. We've really started to align business plans. As you know, Network Rail receive funding in 5-year control periods, so they know how much money they've got to spend for the next 3 years. We're now producing our first 3-year delivery plan for the department to align our funding with Network Rail's and the plans we have for the railway with the plans they have. Aligned business planning and good understanding of profit and loss are essential to get the most out of your railway. And we're also sharing data. Andrew Haynes really wanted Network Rail to put passengers first. He launched that programme. But if the train operators didn't tell Network Rail what customers were happy with or not happy with, or when they were travelling, or in what numbers, or where the revenue was being generated and where it wasn't, Network Rail didn't actually have the insight or the data to truly put passengers first. We've corrected that now. If you're a track section manager looking after a piece of track between Ashford and Tunbridge, you now know how happy the customers are that travel over your bit of railway, how much revenue we earn through that stretch of our network, how quickly that area is growing. I have never seen more curiosity and engagement from a group of people than I have with the Network Rail team. They've really rolled their sleeves up, said, tell me all of this. Let me understand how what I do really impacts the customer. And they've been fantastic partners. All of this is built on a strong collaborative culture. And this lady down here, our Chief of Staff, Lisa, she wrote a framework, how you can create an integrated railway before the GBR bill is passed. And we're exploiting that. We say coming together, integration is like couch to 5K. First you walk, then you jog, and then you run. And we've been at this for a couple of years. We've built a lot of trust, and we are working together more closely than ever before. And that collaborative culture gives us the foundations for success. So what's it actually mean to bring a Network Rail Kent route and a train operator together? Well, we talk about coming together organisationally, culturally and digitally. Organisationally, we've now got drivers and signallers in the same department for the first time in 30 years. We've got access planning that determines when you will stop the railway to do maintenance, and train planning when you plan your service for customers in the same department for the first time in 30 years. The people who look after our fixed assets and the people who look after our rolling stock working together more closely than ever before. This is very sensible, very logical, and the local teams are really embracing it. These two gentlemen here on the left, Scott Brightwell is our Safety Planning and Performance Director. He plans the railway we're going to run. This gentleman here, David, is our Chief Operating Officer. He says this is where the magic happens. In his department, they run the railway every day. And then Scott's team measure how well we deliver that performance. Yesterday, we delivered 96.6% time to 3. You know, it was a near perfect day. Today, not so. But Scott plans, David delivers, Scott checks, and then between them, they work out what to do. We've got another version of that photo with them actually hugging. You know, they are really that collaborative, but you weren't ready for that. You know, we've not reached the watershed yet. So by design, organisationally, we're bringing track and train together. We're also doing it culturally. We've had a lot of barbecues last summer. So if you go to Ashford, on one side of the tracks, there's a delivery unit that does the maintenance of that area. And on the other side of the tracks, there's a high-speed fleet depot that looks after the javelins. And those people had never met each other. They didn't have any reason to. Suddenly we created the opportunity for them just to go and get to know each other and just to explore what good looked like. And we talk about find your new best friend. If you work for Southeastern, go and find somebody in Network Rail who can fix a problem for you. Your new best friend. If you work in Network Rail, go and find somebody in Southeastern who can fix something for you. Going into the summer, we were struggling to clean the traction equipment on the Hitachi Javelin. We couldn't find the right protective equipment anywhere. Network Rail said, I've got just what you need. And within 24 hours, the problem was solved. The trains were being prepared for the hot weather, and the trains ran really well through a very hot and long summer. Simple, just because those people now knew each other. And it's amazing what people tolerate as their norm. I walk around Ashford Delivery Unit, and they take me inside a shipping container. And inside the shipping container is a set of points where they do training. And it's 35 degrees outside, and it's 40 degrees in the shipping container. But they're really proud because they now have, at their delivery unit, somewhere to train people on points. I walk back to the fleet depot, and it's air-conditioned luxury, you know, and it's just incompatible that the same railway, a couple of 100 metres apart, has got such different capabilities, historic expenditure, expectations. We're now joining the dots. This is a good example here. There's a venue in Margate called Dreamland. Have any of you been there? Some of you? Yeah, that's good. We've had problems in some of those gigs. They do about 20 to 30 concerts a year. And the basic rule is, if we recognise the name of the band, probably going to be okay. People will behave themselves. If we haven't heard of the band, we might expect a bit of trouble. So let's be careful. So we look at this concert venue and say, how can we manage this better as an integrated railway? Well, Network Rail said, what I will do is I'll strengthen the fencing in the Margate area so there's no chance of people trespassing onto the track and putting themselves in danger after the concert. And the station manager says, I've gone on eBay or Amazon, I spent £19.99 on a drone, and the drone will fly above the concert venue, and when the music stops and people start leaving, we know we're 10 minutes away from the crowd walking through our door. Very good. And the railway enforcement officers and Network Rail Lingwood security staff, they said we'll be on patrol when the concerts end, ready to keep peace amongst our people. And the train planning team says we'll run 3 or 4 extra trains after the concert just to keep the crowds moving. That encourages more travel, but generates us more revenue, but it also makes the whole thing safer. So we've got this fabulous dream team at Dreamland that ran more concerts, carrying more customers, earning more revenue with fewer antisocial behaviour incidents than we had ever done before. That's what an integrated railway can do when everybody wants to achieve the same objective and they all bring their best to the fore. So we're coming together culturally. Now, I don't think it will take very long for us to come together culturally. When we launched our railway last June, one of our speakers was from Eurostar, and they said that they had merged Eurostar and Thales. And they said it took about 3 years to take these 2 companies and merge them into one. And those 2 companies speak 5 different languages in 4 different countries. And they've managed to achieve it in 3 years. So I'm pretty confident we can get the people of Kent to talk to each other in half that time. I really am. So we come together culturally. We're also coming together digitally. And on the front of 32 of our passenger trains, we've now got 2 cameras. One of them is a thermal imaging camera. The other is a forward-facing CCTV. And both of those cameras are giving us feeds that go through artificial intelligence. And they spot if assets are starting to overheat. They spot if there's scrap that's too close to the envelope, the kinematic envelope. They spot if trees are getting too close to the signaling system that might obscure a driver's vision. So we are using 32 passenger trains every day to monitor the metro and mainline classic railway and give feedback to infrastructure engineers. It's a really joined up piece of work. That is the most valuable fleet modification that my fleet engineers have ever done, even though it doesn't make any impact whatsoever on the reliability of the train itself. Why this worked is because the Network Rail team really, really wanted the data. The fleet team were very motivated to provide it to them, and we used a third-party company, One Big Circle, just to join the dots and make the tech work. So it was a real dream team of somebody wanting something and the other person being really keen to give it to them. Again, the person in Network Rail had found their new best friend, our fleet director, to make his dreams come true. So what do we want to deliver? We want to create this integrated railway, which we genuinely believe will be safer than the railway that preceded it. It'll be safer because we are better at managing the interface between track and train. There's a safety case for Network Rail, a safety case for Southeastern trains, but the 2 heads of safety work side by side. They don't meet each other once a month in a meeting. They literally work together side by side all day of every day. So we're better at managing interfaces. We're also bringing fresh eyes. The Southeast Trains head of safety looks at something Network Rail are doing and saying, there's possibly a better way to do that. And vice versa. Fresh eyes looking at mature issues allows you to raise the bar on the subject of safety. And the other thing we've done, we've created an integrated risk register that said, out of all the risks that we're managing across our railway, these ones at a whole system level are the big ones, and that's where we're able to put most of our efforts. So better risk management, better interface management, and fresh challenge of old issues has really helped raise the bar on subjects of safety. We also want to have a better railway. We define better as 90, 90 and 2. 90% customer satisfaction, 90% of station stops within 3 minutes, and less than 2% of trains cancelled. 90, 92. And we want to do all of that at a lower subsidy, which basically means we've got to grow revenue faster than we allow costs to grow. And we're not doing that, to make a profit for our shareholders. We're doing all of this because we want our railway to support economic growth and housing and social mobility. We're now a purposeful organisation in the public sector seeking to serve the communities on our network. Lots of examples here, but I'll pick a couple out for you. Normally, when we put an Access for All scheme, Network Rail will spend about £5 million and they'll put lifts on a station. And you arrive at a station, and the good news is it's got lifts, but in no other way, shape or form has it become an accessible station. We now have integrated station plans. So if we know we're going to put lifts in a station, we'll also see if we can create an accessible toilet. And we can make other parts of the station accessible, such as the ticket office windows. In essence, we look at the station holistically, and when we're doing work, we try and do work across the board. It's cheaper that way, and the customer gets a more holistic and better outcome. We've also got these things. These are BVLOS drones. They are drones that you can fly beyond your line of sight. There are now British Transport Police pilots sitting in a bunker, not dissimilar, not as big as this, but in a windowless bunker in London Bridge, able to fly drones out of Hither Green. So if we tell them there's a trespasser on the line near Hither Green, they can put the drone in the air, they can go and see with eyes what's actually taking place. They can give us an earlier indication of when the trespasser's actually left to resume the railway more quickly. We will have drones at Hither Green, Chislehurst and Lewisham flying by April. And the first one is already in the sky. We're also working really hard to allow Network Rail the access they need to maintain their railway. We granted a record number of 198 possessions in period 10 to allow them to maintain the railway. We have granted on 5 of our quieter lines of route access during the day on a cyclical basis. So somewhere like the Medway Valley line has a half-hourly service during the day. And every few weeks, we'll drop that service to hourly between 10 o'clock and 3 o'clock and allow Network Rail to observe the track and to do infrastructure maintenance during hours of daylight. That is more cost effective for them. It allows them to see the railway under daylight. It allows them to see it under electrical load and dynamic load. And it allows them to focus their efforts of a night time on the more intensively used parts of our railway. So having granted more access, we now have the lowest maintenance backlog that we've had for infrastructure maintenance since the pandemic. We have fewer asset failures year on year, and that's contributing to a more reliable railway. Because it's now really important to me that the maintenance of the assets is undertaken as it needs to be, because I'm now accountable for that. I really only used to worry about the maintenance of the trains. Now I have to worry about 1,545 sets of points. Did I mention that? So this is some of the things we're doing to bring our railway together. Let me show you a little bit of some of the things we did over the last year. We had a bit of fun. It was Railway 200. Did you hear about Railway 200? Okay, let's have a little look. So if you look at that and things like the celebration of the Network Southeast network, 465908 is now in its original colour scheme. It brings joy to us every day. Don't bother sending me an FOI because I didn't pay for it. It was donated by Angel Trains. It looks wonderful, but we still want to throw the networkers away. You know, you will be asked that question as you leave, and it's important you answer it, otherwise you won't be allowed out the building. Right, so let's think about this. Are we, if we're putting track and train back together again and going back to the future, are we going back to British Rail days? I joined BR in 1983. The Network Southeast era, led by Chris Green, was extraordinary, ambitious and changing. The Organising for Quality initiative that was brought in 1992 created integrated railways where the big functions like civil engineering and the mechanical engineering function got assigned to business units. It was a purple patch in British Railways days. But we are not going back to British Rail. You will see this logo. People like the logo. You know, it's synonymous with the public sector. So you will see the logo, but I will advocate we are not trying to recreate British Rail of 1992. The world has changed a lot in the last 30 years. You can't imagine what we could do with, for example, digital solutions. Society's expectations of the railway are different. So we are not seeking to recreate British Rail. We should take our inspiration from a number of places, including the Swiss railways. There's a lot to like about the Swiss railways. They have fabulous, iconic timepiece synonymous with a punctual railway. And of course, we've got our own Railway 200 version. That's at London Bridge. I kind of like it. I think it's elegant. It looks great. Forgive me for this, but they've got the Glacier Express, this panoramic train that gives you wonderful views of mountains as you travel on their railway. And of course, we've got networkers with opening windows. Look, no opening windows, opening windows. And of course, they are famous for their triangular chocolate. They do it like nobody else does it. And as we look towards GBR, we've got our own version of the triangle. And we talk a lot about the inverted pyramid. Great British Railways will be an inverted pyramid organisation. Even though we've been running railways as top-down command and control for the last 200 years. The idea behind the inverted pyramid is the people closest to the customer is your local railway. You need to empower your local integrated railway to be hyper-local, to give the people on the Hayes line what they need compared to the people on the Hastings line, compared to the people on the Chatham Main line, compared to the people on the high speed. So if we're going to get really, really customer-centric and meet the needs of customers on every line of route, then those local railways need to be the powerhouse of GBR. And if that's the case, we need the inverted pyramid. That's where the decisions are taken. That's where a lot of our best people are located. And the job of head office and other functions is to ensure that the local railways have what they need to meet their customers' requirements. Those are the design principles around which GBR is being created. And I think that's a seismic shift. Peter Hendy is right behind this. He's saying we need to be customer-centric. You know, when he used to run buses, each bus business did what they needed to do for their customers. They weren't told by head office what services they should or shouldn't run. So locally empowered integrated railways will be the powerhouses of the new Great British Railways. Won't taste as nice as the chocolate, but hopefully you'll remember the triangle. And of course, GBR is only part of the picture. You put together all of Network Rail, all of DFTO, you've only got a piece of the railway jigsaw. You need to have very good relationships with TfL, with the new Passenger Standards Authority that will take over from Transport Focus. The regulator will have a new role under GBR than they have today. The Treasury will be key for any public sector organisation, and GBR will be second only to the NHS in size as a public sector organisation. You know, to keep our people safe, the British Transport Police, who are dedicated to our railway, are a key part of our ecosystem. So you'll hear a lot about GBR being created, but what really matters is that we make the whole ecosystem work. And if we go outside of that ecosystem, not all railway problems can be solved by railways. When we look at suicides that take place on our railway, we need to include local authorities. We need to include third sector charitable organisations that look after the homeless or the youth or those with mental health. We need to work with the probation services. We need to work with the civil police as well as the transport police. So for railways to truly achieve the outcomes we want, we need to work with all the partners that are associated with our system. I told you there'd be an iceberg. I'll keep it short, but we now are beginning to look at our railway quite differently. We've been doing some things for 200 years and they still keep happening. So why aren't we learning the lessons? Our railway runs through Kent, the Garden of England. There are 6 million trees on our railway. 6 million. I don't know who's counted them, but 6 million is what I'm told. Every so often, an event occurs and a tree comes down. So we've made a perfectly rational decision. If a train runs into a tree, but a driver can do a 6-point check that he's still got brakes, he's still got traction, there's nothing hanging down, the driver can proceed to the next station without waiting for a fitter to attend. So we haven't done anything to reduce the number of trees falling down. We've just made it quicker to respond when they do. But we can also see there are certain patterns. You know, trees fall down when wind is in a particular direction or above a particular strength, and they often come down actually the day after a storm, not just on the day of the storm itself. So we're looking to understand where to put our people and when in order to cope with the weather that we see on our railway. So we're just getting better at managing the pattern. But what I really want to do is dig deeper and look to really understand what's going on so I can change it. So some very clever people in Network Rail are creating a model to understand what trees are most likely to come down. That depends what species there are, whether they're in full foliage, whether they're on a slope or not, what kind of soil they're in. We've got 6 million trees. About 1,000 of them are designated at risk. Every time there is a storm and a tree comes down, it's never one of the ones in the at-risk category. Of course, none of the trees have read the schedule that says you're at risk and you're not. So they're just coming down randomly. So we're trying to change our railway by being able to better predict which trees will come down. We're also looking to see whether we've got the right powers to address that. The Highways Agency have greater powers than Network Rail to remove third-party trees that pose a safety risk. And finally, to really change the system, you've got to look at the mental models. What is the culture that affects the outcome? And if we have a belief that every single time we remove a single tree, we're somehow doing a bad thing, we're going to be living with 6 million trees on our railway for the next several generations and running around trying to deal with it. So we want to look at our railway fundamentally and systemically to make it structurally better. This model was a typical way of looking at track and train. You would look at performance by putting your fixed infrastructure, your fleet and your people together. You'll put them all in an operating plan, so your timetable, your diagrams and your rosters. You deliver that plan, and if something goes wrong, you introduce service recovery. That's helpful to bring track and train together, but it's only part of the jigsaw. Another way of looking at a system is like this. More triangles, if you like triangles. What policies, intelligence, controls, coordination and operations apply to determine a system outcome? One of the things you've heard of is that GBR will create a directing mind. There will be clarity as to what the system should produce. So you will see actually multiple directing minds. Real clarity from the chief executive of GBR or his team to say, I really want the system to do X or Y or Z. Some of that has been missing from the railway we've been running for the last X years. You'll also see us investing in the intelligence of our system. Are we able to forecast demand accurately, like a supermarket can predict how many products they will sell on what day of the week, at what time of the day? Our ability to understand and predict demand is far less mature than it is, for example, for a supermarket. Do we have the capability to model system outcomes? We want to change something, but sometimes when you change things, you get unintended consequences. How good are we at modeling system outcomes? But what you can expect is, if you put track and train together with a really, really strong flavour of collaboration, with people working together naturally every day because it's the right thing to do, you should expect us to be much, much stronger at this level, where we reduce friction, we make the interface work better, and we just oil the wheels of the whole thing. So putting track and train together really helps here, but the bits we need GBR for include the directing mind. When we wanted to upgrade the timetable on the East Coast Main Line, did the directing mind want maximum revenue for L&ER, better regional connectivity, freight growth on the corridor? You have to make a call as to what is most important for you. You have to specify the outputs you want from your system. That's what the GBR directing mind will do. So let me wrap this up for you, and then we'll take some questions. We are now entering a new era of publicly owned integrated railways. The Railways Act of 1993 separated track and train, created rail track, and meant that most operators would move into a franchising situation where they were run for a finite period of time by a private owning group. Now, it isn't the situation where everything public is good and everything private is bad, or vice versa, but we are entering a new era. The Railways Bill will fundamentally change the way that National Rail is run, and it'll be the first substantial change in a generation, and it's being set up to last a generation of its own. And Southeastern is the first in a new era of integrated railways under public ownership. Integrated railways put track and train together, organisationally and culturally and digitally. You need to do all three, otherwise you don't achieve the benefits. They have potential. I say to people, integrated railways are not a panacea. If they are, when I ran the district line, there would have been no signal failures. And there were. So integrated railways are not a panacea, but they do have the potential to be safer and better at a lower cost. I say they give us another gear to go towards our goals at a greater speed. But an integrated railway like Southeastern or Southwestern is only one piece of the jigsaw. The whole railway system is a much bigger ecosystem. And to make railways successful, we need an ecosystem beyond that that includes the NHS or includes the Highways Agency when we talk about things like bridge bashers. So we need a whole ecosystem to really make the railways thrive. We can only do so much at a local level. But we do want to tackle issues systemically. There are always quick wins that you can do, but if an issue happens and you fix it, the chances of that coming back in 3 months' time for you to fix it again is highly likely. If we want to fundamentally and irreversibly change our railway, then we've got to dig deep and tackle some of these issues systemically so that we do not face the same events in the future. And finally, I'd like to remind you that as a publicly owned railway, we exist to serve our communities. Like TfL, we are purpose-driven. We want to support economic growth. We want to support the ambitious plans for housing, and we want to create brilliant social mobility, which our railway has always had a history of being able to do. You know, my engineering director is a former apprentice. My infrastructure director joined the railways on the YTS scheme. You know, railways, almost like no other industry, have the potential to bring young people into our industry and give them a career for life with good pay, pensions and prospects. So we really want to drive our purpose: economic growth, housing and social mobility. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you much, Steve, for an excellent talk, which is, I'm sure, will have provoked a lot of questions. Now, can I just remind people, particularly because a lot of people will be listening to us or joining us online on YouTube, can you wait for the roving microphone before you ask your question? And if you can keep your questions as fairly short, as concise as possible, that'd be great as well. Now, while you're thinking of your questions, Steve, can I ask you one? You've mentioned a bit about, you touched on freight. Can you say a little bit more about how you'll work with the freight companies? Because, you know, the integration between the track and the passenger trains, that seems a no-brainer. But of course, freight in your region is a very significant part of the operation as well.
There is a legal duty for us to support the growth of freight. And we believe a well-run railway is in the interest of both passengers and freight. But some of the practical things we've done, we've offered memorandums of understanding to every freight group on our network. So, for example, we've said if a line of route is closed and your driver, your freight driver, doesn't know the diversionary route, we can make a top driver available to conduct you around a problem. If your freight train fails on our railway, we could send a fitter from a depot. So the Gillingham fitters attended a seized wheel set on a freight train recently and got the railway running again. So we believe we can systemically support freight on our railway. It's not them or us. Actually, we want to do both. We haven't cancelled a single freight train in 3 months on our network as a result of something we've done. In the autumn season, we bought a Sand Rover. Do you know what one of them is? It's like a Land Rover that can put sand on the track. It's like a Land Rover, but 10 times as expensive. And we put one of those on the Isle of Grain branch, which brings in about half of the fuel used at Heathrow Airport, and that ensured that that branch was always able to continue with its freight flows throughout the autumn period. So we're really serious about helping the success of freight alongside the success of passengers. And well-run railways have space for both.
Great, thanks, Steve. All right, there's a question up there.
Fascinating talk. Thank you very much, Steve. You mentioned network replacement. Can you say anything more about it? And before I forget, your slide with the 1992, should it have been less than 2% cancellations? Because it was showing greater than 2. Just let you take that away. Don't worry about that now. But can you
So
say
did it say more than 2%?
Yeah, it did.
Okay, so well spotted. Yeah, it's fact check. I have shown that slide to literally hundreds of people. Yes, it should say fewer than 2% cancellations.
Yeah.
I'm not going to sack my chief of staff because she's a really nice person. But it's amazing that no one else saw it. So yes, 90% or more punctuality and fewer than 2% cancellations. Networkers. We are going through a procurement process. We have shortlisted our manufacturers. Their bids are now in. We're now finalising the financier that will buy the train and marrying up the best financier with the winning manufacturer with a view to creating a business case for the Treasury and the Department for Transport this summer. And we expect to be able to argue that replacing the networkers with a modern equivalent train will lower the cost of the railway over the next 3 years, which is the duration of our funding review, and over the next 35 years, because you've got to replace the networkers at some point, haven't you? And actually a modern train uses significantly less energy, even though it's air conditioned, uses significantly less energy and has lower operating costs. So I expect that we will know later this summer how we can proceed with the replacement of the networkers. They do a good job for us, but they are not accessible and they are not air conditioned, and open brackets, they're not brilliant in the rain, close brackets. So we want to do what Greater Anglia have done. They have brought a new fleet of trains and it has transformed their railway to be one of the best in the country, consistently one of the best. And we want to do a GA. We want to replace our metro fleet and transform the railways of South East London.
So you mean the 376s and the 707s might go at some point later?
No comment.
They're all part of the metro fleet.
We've got a question in the middle here. Gentleman just in that row there.
It's on a similar theme to the last question in a way, but how much influence do you have on the design of the new train?
We have written an incredibly detailed specification involving track and train expertise that said, actually, this is the train we want for our railway. For example, we specified that we want batteries on board our trains because we've got 60-year-old cables supplying power to our third rail. We haven't got hundreds of millions of pounds to replace them, and occasionally the third rail power supply fails. So we want our new trains to carry batteries so they can provide service continuity in the event of power supply failure. They will allow trains to operate during trespass incidents at low speed, where we've turned the power off to protect the trespasser, but we still want to keep the railway running even at walking pace. So we have specified what we want to achieve with this train in terms of energy efficiency, acceleration, contingency with batteries, and then we invite the market to give us their best product. But to answer your question candidly, there are many mandatory specifications in what we've asked for. Some specs are this big, some are that big. We've gone for the large end. We're quite clear what kind of train our metro needs, and that's what we've asked for.
I mean, one of the reasons I asked was just about the, obviously, South West trains have just finally got their new trains into service after a long time. And they are quite nice trains, I have to admit, but they've designed the seats for Chinese people who are short and very thin.
Yeah, you'll see some differences. We're looking for a train that maximises unassisted boarding. You know, the South West fleet does not do that. It was purchased, I think, when we had when that wasn't the priority that I think it is today. If you buy a new fleet of trains today, you're locking in for the next generation particular features. So I want a more accessible train. We've also insisted on one toilet on board every train, because that's, when I was on the Underground, we didn't have any toilets, but literally now we show on our customer information screens at a station whether the next train's got toilets or not, because this is important to a lot of people when they're travelling. So we think we've specified the train that we need. High capacity, but with a toilet, and much more accessible. And it won't look like the Southeastern fleet. But that is transformational, because you're swapping old for new.
Okay, we have a question at the back and then a question at the front here.
Thank you, Steve. That was a really excellent presentation. And it leaves me feeling that I understand a lot about the way in which you are shaping the mechanics of the railway to deliver for its customers. What, as a former director of a passenger transport executive which purchased services from British Rail in the old days, what I'm left feeling is I don't know nearly so much about how you're going to handle the customer interfaces. Partly your answers to the rolling stock question have suggested what might be done, but I look at the fact that you're refurbishing the 386s, which of course are trains without toilets, and the 707s, as a gentleman of a certain age, I have to say, are also not terribly conducive. But I wonder, could you tell us a bit more about how in fact you're going to be consulting the customers and the people that represent them, such as Kent County Council, for example?
Yeah, that's really important. So if we say that integrated railways are going to be closest to the customer, then we have to really know what our customers want. We survey 2,500 customers every 4 weeks. We have stakeholder meetings twice a year. We did sessions with all the county councils the week before last, planning our railway to 2055. So you should expect us to do more consultation and ask more questions, rather like TfL do. If they're planning to change a bus route or consider a change to a timetable, they will consult on that. You will expect publicly owned railways, I think, to do more of that. To answer your question on the rolling stock, we are refurbishing the 376s to make them better. And the gentleman that asked earlier, we're putting thicker padding on the seats. And they've got LED lighting at seat sockets, thicker padding on the seats. They're great. But they don't have toilets, and they don't have air conditioning, because I don't have the money to retrofit that. But we have said we want all of our trains ultimately to have air conditioning and toilets on board. But the 376 refurbishment is an interim step that will make that train better without reaching the finishing line. On the 707s, Siemens and Angel have agreed to retrofit toilets to the 707s. We just haven't got the plan to do that yet, but we believe that is appropriate and will make that train, more usable in the future to a more inclusive customer base. So expect us to be really listening to our customers. We do meet the managers all the time. We're on social media all the time. I'm reorganising to put my customer services team alongside my stakeholder team that talk to MPs, alongside the team that talk to councils. We are listening and trying to create the best railway for our customers. The other thing I would say is when 14 train operators all work for DFTO, you should expect us to be more consistent in what we give to our customers. So the first sign of disruption, we should be accepting each other's tickets. There are some things that we should all be doing because we've got the same owning group, and all customers are happy if your local railway gives you a little bit extra, but there should be a minimum standard, a higher standard, that all 14 operators are delivering to you, our customers.
If you were to ask me, as a passenger, what I wanted
as a customer, the first thing I would tell you is I don't want to be demoted to the status of a customer. That's somebody in a sweet shop. The railways, people who use the railways are an altogether higher form of life, to get the terminology right. But if you ask me what I'd noticed as a passenger over the years, one of the things I've always noticed is that, to me, the station ought to be the shop window of the railway. It ought to be inviting me in. But much of the time, the railway seems to regard stations as a necessary evil, upon which it spends as little time and money as it possibly can. And when I've queried people in the railways as to why this is, he says, you've got to appreciate that in the rail industry, there's a hierarchy of esteem. Up the top there somewhere, there's the chief mechanical engineer, who is the local god to whom everybody defers. And the lowest form of life on the railway that people get promoted out of is the commercial section. What can you say to persuade me that anything has changed?
Yeah, okay, it's, the inverted pyramid doesn't work unless you turn it upside down. So the commercial department are now driving the top revenue line. They introduced, barcodes came into supermarkets in the 1960s, but we've now got e-tickets across all our railway, selling over 1 million a period. The commercial department really is key to listening to our customers and specifying what they need. In terms of the stations, let me just pick that up as an example. Margate Station is now had a beautiful 1930s style makeover. It looks like something from a film set. The buffet has been beautifully restored. We're helping the Railway Heritage Trust spend as much money as they're prepared to give us. So we've upgraded stations at Herne Bay, Ramsgate, Margate, Tunbridge Wells, Canterbury West, Blackheath. You've been to Blackheath lately? It's had a full all-over makeover. You know, platforms, canopies, waiting rooms. It's been transformed. So for every single station on our network now, we have an integrated station plan that said when the funding becomes available, this is what we want to do. And the estates team, led by Peter Stapleton, are at the, you know, they're really up there on our hierarchy. You know, they are the people we're giving more money to each year to make our stations better. While you are waiting for a train, I want you to be able to have a nice cup of coffee. I want you to enjoy the ambience. I want that to be part of the experience. You know, here in London, some of what's been done has been, in big major stations has been transformational. Liverpool Street today compared to how it used to be. London Bridge today compared to how it used to be. We want to do more at Cannon Street and at Charing Cross, but to answer your point candidly, stations do matter and they get their share of the funding and there's no hierarchy here. There's 181 stations, I'm not allowed to have a favourite. I want good stations as well as good trains. You know, we want to tackle this holistically.
Great. We have time for a couple more questions. If people keep their questions brief, please.
Thank you very much for a very interesting talk. I just wondered if you could comment on livery, as you talk about local being driven by your local influence. Maybe people are attached to the Southeastern identity. And where does the Great British Railway livery fit with that?
Honestly, I think we're still working that through. If I'm honest, I love, for example, that Great Western have a beautiful green livery. And when you look at their train, you know it's their train. And I want us to embrace the strength of the local relationship we have with our customers and our people, while recognising we're all part of a much larger organisation that's heading towards GBR. So there will be some form of interim branding that signposts the fact that GBR is coming. And I think we need to work through exactly how that's going to work. But it's important, I think, to retain a sense of local ownership as well as a sense of wider public good. And our challenge will be to steer that balance. I don't know the answer to that question, and frankly, it won't be my decision. But I think, you know, there is value in local brands as well as value in being part of a bigger organisation. You know, when I worked for London Underground, my team used to say, we're the Metropolitan line. not the subsurface railway. And our trains, you know, our brand is purple, and we were the oldest, and they loved being part of the Metropolitan line. But they felt part of the subsurface railway, and they felt part of the underground, and they felt part of TfL. You can be a member of different teams, but we'll need to think, I think, quite carefully on the brands. I think you'll see interim branding coming quite soon, but the end state, we've got to work out exactly what that looks like and when. Because a lot of brand new trains don't need repainting for the next 15 years. And I think it's really important we focus on making the railway better for customers now, fewer than 2% cancellations, over 90% time to 3, 90% customer satisfaction. Because if you get all that, they won't mind what colour the trains are. So we need to fix the railway first and deal with the branding secondly.
Did we have one last question? One here. That's it.
Thanks very much for a very interesting presentation. Is there anything that you don't have control over, but if you did have control over it, that would make the passenger experience even better?
Wow, that's a good question. If I'm honest, I'm an optimist. My glass is half full. In the last couple of years, the Department for Transport have really taken a step back and said, this is your railway, concentrate on what's important. I am really grateful for that. They now measure me on subsidy, not cost, as it was straight after the pandemic. They've given us 1,900 people from the Kent route who are really want to make this railway perform better. So at this moment in time, we have all the core ingredients that are making our railway a little bit better. We want February to be better than January. We want 2026 to be better than 2025. And we've not run out of ideas yet. There's a lot we can do with what we already have. At some point in the future, GBR will be one employer, not two. Might have single funding, not separate. But honestly, those things are not getting in our way at the moment. The only thing I would really like to do, if I may mention this again, is to replace the networkers. Because that's a game changer. It really is.
Great. Thank you, Steve, for a fascinating talk and for answering all our questions. So,
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So thank you, everybody, for coming, and thanks to all of you at home watching on YouTube for listening in. Now, just a reminder that our next talk here is on 9th of March, which will be Gary Mewis. And you can book that, if you haven't already done so, on the website. So thank you very much, and for those of you here, safe journey home. Thank you.